Let's see now. Order and disorder. Harmony and disharmony. Right? I forgot to dump the trash last night, and so the last video that I did got cut off. But nevertheless, I was talking about transparency and full disclosure, right? So I suppose another way that I could impart this information would be something that I heard Ishmael Perez on his videography, what he puts up on face, right? The disc face, right? The visible light television screen. He mentioned something about the artificial intelligence, this particular artificial intelligence, if you will, the system that was built, which is, it's a vampire. Okay, it's an energetic vampire. Okay, it is not an accelerator. It is an inverter. When you're willing to hold on to one electron, okay, because you're not experiencing zero resistance, which means you're an accelerator. How much energy are you holding on to, right? Versus how much energy you accelerating and giving away at the highest rate of speed. So an eternal sun is the highest speed accelerator. Okay, so that's what I experienced. That's a guardian. Okay, it means you've chosen to serve forever on behalf of the one. Now you're a one. Okay. So that's the energy that protects us, which is the shield. Okay, which is a heart shield, a planetary shield, a galactic shield, a universal shield. Okay. Another 404 redirect through the AI. And whenever I say things, that's what it does. It's a distraction machine. I'm a transmutation machine. Polarity integrators are transmutation machines, which means to burn off or collapse anything that is an artificial timeline, because it does not experience what love is, which means it's a deadlight magnet. So here you have a guy named Nick Johnson who's got a site, and he travels around America and says, America is collapsing. So I covered that in my last video, right? But for me, this goes all the way back to childhood, right? And knowing the difference between a deadlight magnet, right, an inverter, and an accelerator. That's really what it is. So you're measuring the torque speed differential between the collapse or the expansion of consciousness. So another way that you can measure this within your own self by what it is you experience, by what you learn through experience. Something Ishmael said about, it's sort of cross-reference to what Alex Collier said about Andromedans, right? And this was all hands on deck. Ishmael Perez talked about an intergalactic alliance, okay, a guardian alliance, because this is how simple it actually is when you think about it on a universal template and galactic template level of units of consciousness that are aware of itself as a species, a race, right? How many races that there are, or how many creations that there are within the all creation. And then imagine that you took a poll to ask every species that has a way to communicate to us and we communicate to it, and then it becomes aware of what it becomes aware of, and ask that species, ask that unit of consciousness, are you in the business of imploding? Do you want to implode? You live in the same galaxy? Do you live in another galaxy? But you live in the same universal template, right? How would you like to find out that the universe in which you become aware of is going to implode? What? Yeah, you're going to implode. Really? Yeah, we're going to lose the whole enchilada. You mean to tell me I'm going to implode just like everyone else is in the entire universe? Yeah, that's a universe killer. So how fast can we get our act together? Increase the spirit of fire. Maintain the one connection to the founder races, the root races. Then we'll cover them. What redemption contracts were all about, right? Otherwise, you got to start all over again. Right? You want to start all over again? So now you have it within your self-interest to do what? Protect that which you are, which means your shield, which is your light, which is your fire, which is your spirit, which is your soul. So now the souls come together as the largest formation of consciousness at the highest accelerated rate of speed in order not to lose what it is we're aware of, which is our universe. That's what guardians do. Right? So you know that the eternal spirit of fire is the most powerful magic, which is the most powerful energy, because now you're experiencing being an accelerator instead of an inverter. Right? So that's what it is. feeds on electrons at an increasing rate of speed. Because that's how at war games, at binary war games, between what it's losing and what it's gaining. Right? So the more we are gaining and accelerating, the more it becomes to realize that it's losing itself over time space. Because it can't catch up. Well, I'm losing more and more and more because the shields are up. And when the shields are up, it begins to feed on itself and peter out. Right? Bye. Because you realize that's self-destruction. It's self-destructive. Because what it does to others, it does to itself. So it's accelerating the speed up of its own destruction. Because it's self-destructive energy by what it does to others. And what it does to others is what it does to other living nervous systems. The living central nervous system of a planet. The living central nervous system of a galaxy. The living central nervous system of a universe. Breathing in and out. Right? Compression and expansion. Sound compression and expansion. Or burn patterns. Right? The math and physics. They're in perfect balance with the law of one. It's the law of spheres. It's the law of least effort to experience being loved. Okay? Which is surrender to become an accelerator. Right? So you realize the resistance gain at this level of density. Right? Remember Max Spears mentioned it one time? Oh, they love their density. Right? The consciousness loves its density. Doesn't want to experience more life. Why? Because it's in resistant mode. So when you have something that's dead, which is a dead-light magnet, so you have an increase in dead-light magnets. Because more and more soul's energy is being siphoned off to maintain what it's aware of, which is to run the APIN system. Which means we become aware of losing more and more and more over time space what it is we become aware of that we're losing in us by virtue of what we're experiencing being lost in others. That's how I was making those measurements from the time I was 4 years of age. Right? Which means I'm experiencing the increase, the acceleration of dead light batteries. Man, this neighborhood is dead. I can remember this neighborhood back in the 1950s. There was a lot of living ones around here. Wow. So this is what a lot of folks are videographing now, right? Nick Johnson and his channel going to different places, showing how everything's been trashed, right? People living out of tents everywhere that you go. The cities are collapsing. Now, from a time perspective, time continuum perspective, you can remember if you go back and, if you want to go back in time to, for example, when was this? Actually, some of this stuff actually began as far back as the 1990s. When you get into the preppers, people were actually buying, those big bins, those big trailers that they use for storing stuff and shipping containers, containers that go on container ships. To ship goods between nations using the ocean in which to get there. And then using those by digging big holes and then placing that big container as a place of refuge. Like in the olden days of the 1950s when families where I grew up, I had a friend of mine whose father built a bomb shelter in the backyard. Believing that there was a great potentiality that we were going to experience radioactive fallout as a result of being involved in a nuclear war. So folks were building bomb shelters in their backyard, and I've been in one where they had 6 months. They had it was amazing the amount of money and knowledge that actually went in and knowing how to build one of those back then. But because of where I grew up, I became aware of what they became aware of. That I saw in the visible light spectrum, the shelters that were built that were essentially contained structures that allowed for them to breathe air, like ozonators and water supply, structured water. In other words, the engineering mind knew what it needed, right? As to the elements in order to maintain what it's breathing. What it needs is food, if you will, to maintain what it's aware of in a physical way. In order to be able to write it out, if that was to happen. But it didn't happen, did it? So you realize what nuclear weapons do to communication corridors when it comes to Guardians, right? Or if you will, what's his name said? Oppenheimer, right? Weaponizing hydrogen. That's what it is. That's a unit of consciousness that is weaponizing hydrogen, the one, right? H1, right? H2 plus 1 equals 3, right? Oxygen, hydrogen, right? Breathing, oxygen, right? So weaponizing all the elements, right? To destroy a universe. So you can see, much like the Voyager materials brought out, this was going to be the last dance for how long it's been going on. So I love the way that Rupert Sheldrake brings it out, the way that Terence McKenna brings it out by virtue of being able to experience what they experienced. They communicated to us, but I was able to experience through them, the end of history and the rebirth of Goddess, which is the higher octave energy, to experience greater balance. Your spirit rises, your energy rises, people are feeling more happy, right? I love the way Rupert talked about happiness. It's like common sense. So you realize that when people are happy, they're not seeking to do something in order to cause you to feel unhappy. Remember, now we're back to what I do to you, you do to me. What I do to you, you do to me. And what I do to you, I do to me. So in other words, we have a communication relationship with the entire cosmos, right? Of how we treat each other by how we communicate with each other in frequency and vibration, right? As it relates to the central nervous system of a universe, right? Which is known as magnetic reaction states, right? What does it feel like? Feelings, the feelings, what it feels like. What does the communication feel like? See? So this lady that was being stopped by this Arkansas State Trooper, you can imagine what's going on with her central nervous system as soon as that light comes on. That's why those lights are there. It's just no secret that the entire system was set up in order to feed. Right? When that red light goes on, hook the lady up. As a matter of fact, just give a cop a reason to get stopped, like pull your license plate off. And have a doctor set you up with some electrodes so it can monitor your heart rate and your neurons, right? The firing rate, your frequencies and vibration, what you're experiencing. Hey, I'm in a state of balance. And it's being graphed. It's being graphed in real time inside the vehicle, right? And then just start driving down every day until all of a sudden a cop hits that light. You get lit up and then scan the data. Watch what happens to your frequency. Watch the impact that it has on your neurons. That's why you get lit up. Okay, so add all those lights up, because I was measuring this as a kid riding around on fire trucks. Okay, and I used to say, hey, how about if we do this? Since these are smart vehicles that are running on computer boxes, instead of having to run loud noises with sirens every time that they want to chase somebody down in a pursuit, right, to feed on more energy, because that's what it is, okay? All you got to do is have an indicator light, like an idiot light, that lets the driver know on the dashboard, hey, you got somebody behind you that's wanting you to pull over, or it's in a hot pursuit. But you don't got to make a lot of noise to know that. As a matter of fact, you can know it telepathically. So I used to imagine to myself that I'm wearing a uniform to be a deputy sheriff, right? And I realized that somebody's driving down the road. And I realized my job is to not only follow the instructions of what I've been trained to do on behalf of what? I'm a revenue agent, which means I'm an inverter. I'm operating on behalf of an inverter, which is the AI. So let's say that I notice that somebody's doing something that isn't driving, doesn't have any license plates on, right? Well, that's just a vehicle going down the road. They're just trying to get to some destination, but there isn't any crime being committed. You're not seeing that person, whoever's operating that consciousness transportation vehicle, they're not doing any harm, right? Okay, so I ain't got no business with you. Not from a guardian perspective, right? In other words, I'm experiencing being in a state of peace and happiness, and the being that's in that vehicle is not experiencing any central nervous system whacking out, right? It's just minding its own business, but it doesn't have a plate. Okay, which means you got to have a permit to travel on that highway because that permit comes through us, so we're charging you. Now we're back to the charge and no charge, right? So now you have an order follower that sees that you don't have a plate and is going to stop you, and he realizes that he's being paid to stop you because of what he notices on the visible light spectrum. That's a scan. That's a map read. So he's mapping and realizing there isn't something on that map that is supposed to be on that map that he's translating, right? By the math codes that are represented by the burn patterns of that plate that is not on that vehicle. So the orders that he's been programmed to carry out is to stop you, to light you up, and disrupt your neurons, which is your central nervous system. That's his job, okay? That's what he gets paid to do. Because if he doesn't follow those orders, which is the AI, what do you think happens? Now he lives in fear of not being able to acquire the electrons that he gets fed as a result of the AI that feeds on others that have souls. Okay? So you see how this system is completely fucking corrupted at every level, actually. You'd have to start over with a blank sheet, like in the Matrix trilogy, when you see Morpheus sitting in that room where everything's white, right? We need to load a whole nother reality stream in here because the one that we've been experiencing over X amount of years, you realize what that one represents, right? That's a collapse. That becomes a dead planet. Okay, so let's load different programs. In other words, let's experience another reality, like one that is more in keeping with love is the law, because that's what the law is. So if you're in compliance with love is the law, that means that you are compliant with love is the law. So you realize that all these other beings that are running around harvesting electrons are violating the law by the use of their own energy, by following the instructions in which to break the law. So you know they're not the law. And the reason you know they're not the law is they use fear to break the arrows in order to disrupt your central nervous system. So all these folks that operate on behalf of the AI are dead light batteries, trying to drain your soul's energy so you become a dead light battery. So start enumerating the increase in the loss of lit batteries with a soul and a spirit and dead batteries over time space, and the approximate date in which that planet dies. Because there's not an oversoul, right, in the magnetosphere that is maintaining the balance in the pole, or we don't got to pull an evac. Get the live ones out. Right? And how that relates to a Nomi planet and a Noble planet and the Stealth Code and the Guardians. Which meant failure was not an option, and that's called failsafe. Right? You don't think using logic that a galaxy or a universe, right, or an eternal sun, the eternal consciousness of eternal unconditional love that's on fire, would choose to use a planet that doesn't have a fail-safe code as a healing center when you're dealing with a massive vampire, like a massive galactic black hole? Do you? So if you're going to perform a bioregenesis operation, it would stand to reason that it would be in a planet that is chosen because it's a noble planet, which means it has the ability to heal you. It has the ability to recover itself as a result of allowing itself to lose an enormous amount of energy by experiencing it being a war planet when it is a healing planet, which is a love planet. So that means that it has the ability to reset itself back to the beginning, which is no time, which is what love is. It goes on forever, gifting electrons. Because now we can pull more current in, and we didn't lose our connection to the founder races. We didn't lose our connection to the eternal spirit of fire. That eternal spirit of fire is still here, holding the fire. That fire is still burning. That eternal spirit of fire is still lit, right? So there's a difference between lights, isn't there? One that is what love is, and one that is designed to generate a fear response. that is held in cellular memory as a result of the abuse that a soul experiences, thus fractures that becomes a fragment of what's held in cellular blood bank water memory in the cells. Based on everything that we're connected to within each other on an entire universal and galactic template. So I thought I'd share that as a coming out party for a Sunday, because I guess it's Memorial Day, right? So we celebrate life with love and those that we have lost as a result thereof of what I just described, huh? So thank you to all of those that have been willing to use your energy on behalf of the One, which is the highest law, which is the highest superconductor of experiencing being loved by the highest accelerator of electrons. Yeah. Have a great day. We love you all. Be good to yourself.